today, some of the problems we're going to cover are program continuity, thinking about how to build a GRC program, a sustainable GRC program, and ultimately getting out of Excel. How do you get out of paper-based or ad hoc processes and into a system that you can maintain and grow your compliance program with? So we'll dive into the content here. Quick introduction. We have a lot of current clients, so welcome if you're a Risk 360 client. Thanks for joining. If you're new to us, welcome. We're happy to have you. But if you don't know who Risk 360 is, we're a consulting firm, and we also have a platform, Phalanx GRC. As a consulting firm, we do SOC reports, ISO, high trust. You know, if there's an acronym associated with it, and it's in the security and compliance universe, we deal with that. We also help organizations build out security programs through vCISO. We do penetration testing, and we do privacy work. So we consult, and we're also the auditor and issue certifications. The reason that matters is that informed how we built the platform. So we'll talk about Phalanx as we go through this webinar today. And Phalanx was our tool before we released it to the market. We built it originally because Risk 360 wanted a platform to be able to build programs for and with our customers. So we built it, and we were the original users. So over the last 7 years, we've refined all of our processes, all of the systems, Phalanx itself, because we were the ones doing the work. So I think as we go through here, you'll see there's a lot of thought that has been put into how we've built the platform. A lot of the processes and systems and recommendations that we're going to make through this webinar come from experience and not theory. So hopefully you find it very practical. Couple cool things I think about Phalanx generally that makes it very unique in the marketplace is there's already hundreds of clients using Phalanx today. Some are using our free version that we call Essentials. So if you want to try out a free GRC platform, you can register, and I'll show you how to do that later. But for over 7 years, or over almost 7 years now, hundreds of clients using it. We've implemented hundreds of SOC 2 and ISO programs, PCI programs, and others have 100% success rate in getting those out. We're also the first ever platform and security and compliance company to get ISO 27001, which is security, ISO 27701, which is privacy, and ISO 22301, which is business continuity certified. We thought we should eat our own dog food. We should practice what we preach and get those certifications ourselves, and we did that for our platform and our consulting firm through using our own platform. So we have a really high degree of confidence that it works, and obviously with you guys putting your sensitive data in there, we want to give you some confidence the same way that you want to give your customers confidence. And also everything in the platform is based on best practices like NIST 830, ISO 27005, and all the popular frameworks. So we've embedded that intelligence right into the platform. So everything I'll talk about today in terms of processes, ways that you should go about doing things, the platform itself, just have that degree of confidence that we've tried to build that right into our processes and platform. So hopping in today on what we want to cover, and the way I think that it is helpful to think about this is to think about this in terms of problems that we've actually seen in the real world. And we have a client, John, who is a security and GRC leader, and I'm sure this will resonate with a lot of you. He leads his security and GRC team. He owns the SOC 2 and ISO 27001 program. There's always new security and compliance frameworks that he's having to add to that program all the time. And his company he's a SaaS company that has multiple products. So it's not just one single product, it's 3 unique products with different scopes and different audit requirements and different types of customers. That just creates a lot of complexity for him. And John is representative of probably most of you and many of our clients that we see. And John has a problem that he wants to solve. And this is what we'll focus in on today, how to solve these problems and what systems you can use to solve them. The first problem that John has is there's a lot of jobs that you need to do as a security and GRC professional. There's like 100 things that need to happen. And he doesn't have a good inventory of what are all of those things. And to build a good GRC program, you need to have a beat on what are those things that you need to do. And then not only do you need to know what are all of those things, but you need to know who does them and how you do all of those jobs. And that's a big lift, because if you've managed a security and GRC program, you know that there's dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of things that need to be done, but how do you know what they are and that they're getting done? And then John also runs into the problem that almost everything is in Excel and lives in a shared folder, like a Google Drive or a Microsoft shared folder or something like that. And because everything is in Excel, everything is based on someone's personal preferences. It lives on their desktop. It's hard to share things and collaborate. If someone leaves the company, the process that they owned in Excel and that they managed carefully just falls through the cracks, and the next person doesn't pick it up. So he has a lot of trouble with continuity of his overall program. And this is something that we see with many of our clients out there as we're in the field, and we're trying to solve for this. And I'm sure if you're here, this resonates with you. So how do you fix a problem like this? So I think the way that you start fixing a problem like this is through a system. So not just a tool, but a way of thinking about a security and compliance program. And the way I like to break down the system and what we'll talk about today is there's really three key elements, and we've all heard of this: people, process, and technology. So we'll talk about some tools that we'll make sure that you have and that you can download as part of this webinar, and that we'll send to you to solve this particular problem. So the first thing is people. We talked about John's problem is what are all the jobs and who owns those jobs and how do you do them? Well, that's roles and responsibilities. So what's the list of all the things that have to be done and who does them? The second thing your system needs is processes. That's the how do you do those jobs. I think a lot of times people underestimate the value of policy and procedure. But it is important. It's important for the continuity of your program to establish expectations, to people understand what processes to follow. And then if someone changes jobs or leaves the company, the next person can follow those. So how do you do document SOPs? We'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. And then finally, we'll talk about specific tools that are available to you from a technology perspective that are great replacements for Excel that are in a GRC platform. And we'll focus in on our platform, Phalanx GRC. If you're a Risk 360 customer or you're using the free version of our platform, much of this you already have access to, and I'll point that out as we go. So 3 tools and a system to solve the problems that John is having, and I hope many of you can use this to solve your own problems. So let's talk about roles and responsibilities. It's funny, at Risk 360 in our early days, we had the person who runs our operations team join, and almost the first thing that he said was, we should create a RACI diagram. We should document everything that needs to happen, who owns it, and I rolled my eyes. I really didn't see the value in doing that at the time, but as our organization has scaled in complexity and size, I now realize how essential that is, and also how come it is so essential for a security program. If you're a security leader or building out a program, you have to know what all the jobs are and who owns them so that you can communicate expectations to those individuals. And to do that, you need a tool. So how do you do that? So what we created at Risk 360, and we'll make sure, I believe you can download that webinar. We're going to make that available inside the webinar, that you can download this RACI chart. And we'll also send it out afterwards. But we created a roles and responsibilities diagram. There's about 100 line items on here, broken up into categories, that helps you think through what are all the jobs that need to be done, who owns them, who should be consulted in the process, and how do you do that job. So you need that inventory so you can start structuring. Sometimes our clients come to us and the first thing they ask is, who should I hire next, or what should our org structure be, or how do we solve different problems associated with people and structure? And I'll ask, well, what are all the jobs you're trying to fill and for which products? And they often respond, well, I don't have a list of all the jobs. They're in my head. I kind of know what needs to happen. I don't know what the corporate shared service is going to own versus what my security team will own versus what my GRC team will own versus the engineering team. They just don't have a good sense for what that should look like. So they don't know how to staff or hire or give people job titles and responsibilities, and it's a huge problem. So even if you're, it doesn't matter if you're using Excel or you're using a GRC platform, you have to figure this piece out. So I often start here, that you have to know what you need to do and who owns those jobs. And I want to show you, I want to hop through some of this just to give you a couple examples, like 1 or 2. So an example here for a security program is there's executive and governance responsibilities. So I'll pick a couple out here just for example purposes. So who reports to the board of directors? Is that the manager? Is that the CISO? Do you have a CISO? Who's accountable for that? Who do you consult if you're going to report to the board of directors? And so on and so forth. There's other jobs too, more technical related. So for example, who owns risk and compliance? Who navigates all of your audits? Who gathers evidence? Who handles the privacy program? And I'll show you one more here. just to show you, get you thinking about things. Security operations. This is when it's like, does my IT team own this? Does my security team? Does the GRC? Who owns event monitoring and analysis? Who owns incident response and investigation, and so on and so forth. So your first job as a security leader or building out your GRC program is to understand all the jobs that need to happen. Who does them? And this is the tool that you can do that. And if you want access to this tool, you can download it right here in the webinar, and we'll be sending it out afterwards. So think about that part of it. All right. So once you've defined your roles and responsibilities, the next thing, and I won't spend a ton of time talking about this, but you do have to document those standard operating procedures, and that's the next part of our framework. And that's, how do you do it? So most folks haven't documented everything, first of all. Secondly, if they have documented, it might not align to best practices or the process that's actually in place, and it's probably not understood by all. So we have a policy portal in Phalanx, and let me pull that up and show you some of the features while we're talking through that. So you need to document those SOPs. If you have Phalanx Essentials or your Risk 360 client, you probably have access to some of this. So in Phalanx, there's a policies portal, and the cool thing that we have done is that we have a ton of policy templates and examples. So if you want to go in and look for policy examples, if you want to, you can make them your own after you deploy them. It is a wiki that you can edit any of this. It gives you a starting point based on best practices, based on frameworks like ISO 27001 or NIST 853 and others already built in, and gives you a great place to start. You can share this with your whole team. You can get them to acknowledge it. You can assign owners and collaborators, all right in this wiki, and it's a great resource if you want to begin. Here in a second, we'll talk about risk management, which is one of the processes that are often in Excel that you can build into tool. But just think about the power of building out a risk management or risk assessment process, and maybe you want to build it based on ISO or NIST. You can hop in here, deploy that policy. You can think through how to do the risk assessment, how to do impact and likelihood, how to score risk, and you don't have to create the policy from scratch, and you can share it with your whole team. So if you're looking for a resource, you can find those templates right in Phalanx inside the policy portal. If you're using the free platform, you already have the information security policy template available to you. And if you're a client, you have some of that available as well. So just heads up that is available to you. So that is, I want to cover those two things first, which is the establishing roles and responsibilities, because that's table stakes to build out your program and ensure continuity and solve some of those problems that John, the GRC manager, is having. And then you have to define standard operating procedures and policies around that stuff. There's tools for that. There's your roles and responsibilities diagram. There's Phalanx for all of your policies. It's best practices. It's the foundation of your program. And it is also required for all the security and compliance frameworks. So this is table stakes to get started in your program. I wanted to start there. So moving along here, the next thing I want to talk about is the technology piece of it. And this is the tactical elements that I think most people want to see when it comes to, I'm doing a process in Excel, I want to get out of Excel. How do I do that? So I narrowed down a few things that you can do that I always see in Excel that are available in Phalanx, either in the free version or in the version if you're a client of ours. And I want to talk through those. I want to talk about doing policies, which I've talked about. I want to talk about doing risk registers. So if you're keeping a risk register in Excel, we'll talk through that. I want to talk about how to manage security controls. So if you have a really long list of security controls, or you don't even have a list of security controls, you just kind of wait for your auditor to come in, and then before the audit, you ask them if they can provide you a list of your controls. We'll talk about how to manage those as well as the evidence. We're going to talk about reoccurring events. So if if you're managing a compliance program, there's 100 different events that you have to manage. How do you know they're happening? So we'll talk about what we call compliance calendar. And then if we have time, I want to talk about vendor management too. If you're sending out questionnaires to vendors, if you have an Excel list of vendors, stop doing that, get into the platform so you can sustain that program. So where I want to start today is on risk register. This is a module in Phalanx. And I'll show you that here in just a second. But what we see, the frustration that we see with a lot of our customers is they have a risk management program, they're doing risk assessments, or they're working with Risk 360 to do a risk assessment. They document all of these risks, and then nothing happens. They document the risk in an Excel risk register. They maybe assign an owner, put a due date on it. They do impact likelihood. They risk score it. The Excel document lives on someone's shared folder somewhere. Things aren't well defined because impact and likelihood mean different things to different people, or maybe you don't even agree on how you're going to do a risk score or prioritize these risks. And generally speaking, GRC managers and even CISOs just get frustrated that they've gone through all of this effort. It's documented in an Excel sheet and nothing's happening. And then worse, someone leaves the company. John leaves the company. He owned the risk register. And now we can't find it. We don't know when it was last updated. There's things that we don't have context on how he was using it. He was creating an executive slide deck somehow out of that Excel risk register, but we don't know. And it's just really frustrating. It's a problem for a compliance program. When we do SOC 2 or ISO audits, we see this all the time where a key person left the company, they own the risk management program. We come in to audit the risk assessment piece of the audit, and no one can find anything. They can find what was provided last year, but they haven't done a risk assessment. They don't have an Excel risk register. I'm sure this resonates with a lot of you. You probably have an Excel document that looks something like this. Now let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you can solve that using Phalanx. And I'll point out that Risk Register happens to be a feature in Phalanx that is available in the Essentials version, which is our free version of Phalanx. So you can get this for free. If you're already a Risk 360 customer, you also have access to that. So I want to talk three things. One, we got to document who owns Risk Register. So that comes back to the roles and responsibilities. Who owns your risk assessment program? I'm going to assume that you've done that. You know the team internally that owns it. You've defined that. Next, maybe you've documented how you're going to do a risk assessment and how you're going to manage your risk register. Phalanx policies can help with that. So if you haven't defined that yet and got everyone on the same page about that, you can use Phalanx, document your policy and deploy the policy and train the team on it. If you already have that internally, great. Now let's get out of that risk register. Let's start managing it with the team. In Phalanx, we have a module called Risk Register. It is based on ISO 27005 and NIST 830. So you'll see a lot of terms in here. You'll see a lot of fields that need to be filled out. As you're working through a risk register, you'll see it guiding you to do certain things. Just know that it's doing that because it's a mandatory field based on a framework, or it's just practically necessary for actionable results out of your risk register. So I'm going to walk you through an example so you can see some of these features and think through how you might do this. So what most of our customers will do is they want to add a risk. So I've already added a few, so you can see these. So here's an access control example. Privileged access rights should be assigned to a user ID different from those used for regular business activities. Okay, we're going to call that a risk statement. Now, what most of our clients need to do is score that risk, so you can start prioritizing the stuff for action. So we took the impact and likelihood, cost and effort metrics here in Phalanx because those are considered best practices. Impact is how bad would it be if this thing happened, and likelihood is how likely is it to have happened. Cost is how much would it cost to fix. Efforts, how much effort would it take to fix. And that helps you start to prioritize stuff. And if you hover over any of these, it gives you definitions. You can actually define your own definitions for what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 means in here. But as it stands, it's already based on the definitions in NIST 830 and ISO 27005. So if you're already working off that, or if you just want to align to a best practice, you can do that. You can choose your impact and likelihood. So maybe it's a 2. I'm going to keep it at 3 here, and that will automatically update your residual risk here, and you can begin to track that. You might want to also document some of the information. So what are the consequences of this thing coming to fruition? Do you have a recommendation about what should actually be done about it? ISO 27001 particularly actually requires that you document a root cause, so you can do that. And then hopefully you're getting a commitment. What does management actually want to do about that? You can document hours to complete. So maybe I think it's going to take 40 hours, and then start and due dates. When was it identified? When do you want to start remediation and end it? And I'll show you in a second. There's some dashboarding that is really cool that has Gantt charts and stuff that this drives. And then ultimately, who is the owner? Who owns this risk? Because it's probably not you. You're probably documenting the risk, but someone owns it. Other cool things is as things change in the risk register. So one of the things that our clients often need is okay, we identified a risk, but we implemented stuff and we had a project to reduce the risk, but I can't remember what happened. I don't have any documentation showing how that impacted the risk, and I never went and updated the risk. Well, anything that happens, you can document right here in risk register. So maybe I put this was remediated because we fixed the issue. I'll add a comment there, and it'll go right in there, and I can see all that change log. If I change the risk scores, if I add files because I wanted evidence that was fixed, if it's a note someone sent, your whole team can collaborate here. So there's some nice project management elements. And the last thing I want to show you is if you're a risk management professional or you want to align to ISO 27005 or NIST 830, the terms that we use, for example, what do you want to do about the risk? Well, maybe I want to accept the risk. Maybe I want to mitigate it. Maybe I want to share it or avoid. Most companies choose to mitigate it, but there are instances where you just have to accept the risk, and you can mark that in here. So if you want to see a whole list of all the risks that your company has chosen to accept and reevaluate those over time, you can do that. This is a great way to systematize an otherwise ad hoc process. So no matter who you add to your team, they're all working off the same playbook. They can see all the historical evidence. They're using terms like mitigate, share, and transfer, impact, and likelihood. It's baked into policy, and it's not subject to an Excel spreadsheet being lost or a column being deleted or anything like that. There's also really great reporting. So if you need to take screenshots or you want to put some of this information into a slide deck to talk to it about managers, you want to see like how much is not started, what's my heat map look like. There's some really cool reporting in here. And there's also a nice remediation roadmap. Sometimes you just want to see when are things scheduled to be completed and you want that Gantt chart view. You can do that in here. And there's other views too, but we've tried to build in views that people commonly want so they can communicate with third parties and outside parties. So that's risk register. The next thing I want to talk about as we go through this is security controls. So what we see with most of our clients is that they have security controls. Maybe they're not documented, but they're doing things. They're usually based on a framework like NIST, like ISO 27001, like SOC 2, or some combination thereof, or even they have many of our clients, because they haven't reached the level of maturity to do otherwise, keep several different control frameworks, each based on a certification they're trying to get. Almost always that control listing lives in an Excel document. There's really not good version control. They haven't assigned owners of each control. They don't really know if the control inventory is accurate. For example, maybe the change management process changed, so they needed to update the control. They haven't done that. There's no way to share those controls so that everyone understands what they need to do. And then when it comes crunch time for the actual external audit, they don't have a tool to gather the evidence to know if they have all the right evidence, or even to know what the auditor is going to request for the evidence. So what happens is the audit itself drives control update, documentation, evidence gathering. And the other thing is if you're managing multiple products and they have slightly different control frameworks, so maybe one product is a SaaS application, another product is an on-prem solution, so their infrastructure just inherently has different controls, there's not a good way to document and track the separate controls required for both. So it ends up being a very sloppy Excel spreadsheet that's not up to date. There's multiple versions of it, all the problems that comes with managing a document in Excel. And again, lack of program continuity, because if someone leaves the company who had all of that historical context, well, that is lost to the company, and largely you'll have to start over and be set back. So Phalanx does have capabilities to help manage this. So I'm going to hop in what we call our assessments module. So in our assessments module, let me find it. There we go. In our assessments module, we have many different frameworks. So you can build your own custom framework if you already have controls documented. You can adopt a framework. So if you want to adopt ISO 27001, SOC 2, NIST, or whatever, you can deploy those. You can also map between frameworks, or you could structure frameworks multi-product. So if you have an organization that has a set of shared services that are kind of the corporate level, like HR and governance corporate, but each product has a unique SDLC, you can structure it all that way within Phalanx. So it has the capabilities to do that. I have already deployed the ISO 27001 framework just as a proof of concept here, so we can look through that. And you can see that these blue bars here are the category. So ISO 27001 has something called clauses 4 through 10, which is kind of the governance framework around ISO. And they require you to do things. So you can see 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, those are the category numbering schemes that ISO uses. So they want you to define organizational context. Well, what does that mean? So if I expand that, we've already built in platform intelligence where we add to that, we describe what it means. We've also built in test procedures on how you might assess if your organization has done that. If you're doing your own assessment, you can do that in the platform here. And I'll show you in a second where we have evidence as well. You can assign an owner. So who owns assigning the context? So maybe you want to assign that to someone. If you want to know what evidence, how would you satisfy that during an audit? Well, you can see there's documentation of context of the organization. I'll show you where that lives here in a second. If I clicked this link, it would take me to the more detailed description, but I'm going to wait to do that. And you can do other things. There's also this tab over here called automations, where we have some integrations where you could automatically pull in evidence where applicable. And if I have time, I'll show you some of that as well. But this is the whole control framework, and it's really nice because if you want to begin to think about if you want to do a pre-assessment to see if you already align to a framework, or if you want to adopt a custom control framework and continually update it, you can do all of that right in the platform, share it with your team, have the whole team working back and forth, doing your own self-assessment, adding tags. It's just a really nice tool to see where you stand. There's also some cool dashboards as you go through to assess it, just like in the other modules, where you can see how much of this is implemented, how much of it is open, what's your maturity. Again, if you're building out those presentations or just want to sanity check that, there's possibilities. The other thing I want to show is evidence requests. So for many security and GRC professionals, the evidence request part of this is an essential element. So what happens is I have a control, but I have to actually provide the auditor something to meet that control to get through the audit itself. So where is all that managed? So we have these mapped together automatically. So if you deploy an ISO framework or a SOC 2 framework or whatever, we already have these built out and mapped. You can, of course, customize these all you want, use your words, your systems. You can do anything you want with it, but there's a lot of intelligence already baked in. So for ISO, we have the whole list of everything that you would need to do to get through an audit and to meet the control, to evidence that the controls are in place. So I'm going to click on one of these. So ISO and their clauses 4 through 10, they have something unique called a statement of applicability. So maybe I want to know what that is. So I click that. There's an overview. It tells you what the typical evidence is. And if you need help, it gives you a reference to the template if you wanted to find that template. You can upload the evidence here. You can see that James Lewis already did that here. And maybe you want to mark that as fulfilled, so you'll know you're good to go. You can see what controls that is mapped to. So in this case, this is mapped to control C 6.1.3, security risk treatment in ISO. And if you wanted to map it to other controls, like across frameworks, like you also want to map it to a SOC 2 control or something, you could do that. And then you can comment back and forth with each other. So in this instance, I tagged Kendall and I said, hey, Kendall, I got it. Thanks for uploading that. Thanks for letting me know it's ready. And how most of our clients are using this is if they're doing their own internal assessment, they can use this to do that. They can also inform people that they need to do something by assigning an owner. So in this case, maybe I'll go ahead and assign John Smith to this issue so he knows that he owns the statement of applicability. So it makes ownership very clear so everyone knows what they own. So if John Smith was to leave the company, we could reassign all John Smith stuff to Jane Doe because she's the replacement for that person. The other way that people use this is to get ready for an external audit. So you can pre-gather all of this evidence download it into a zip file or 1x1 or however you want to do it, and just provide it directly to the auditor. You can even give the auditor access to a clean version of this if you want to clone this assessment with all of your comments and confidential information. Give the auditor access to that so they can self-serve. And you've already looked at all the evidence. You're very confident that's the right thing before it goes to the external auditor. So just a really powerful tool. The last thing I want to show you is if you want to do some cross-framework mapping, a little map icon pops up on some of these. And if I click that, it'll make recommendations. So we see that this is an org chart. It maps to something in ISO, and it might map to something in SOC 2 and other controls. And you could click accept and map that across different controls. That way, one piece of evidence can be used if you're doing SOC 2 and ISO certification and high trust and many others, and you're tired of providing the same piece of audit evidence multiple times. Well, a good way to handle that is just map these pieces of evidence cross frameworks, provide it once instead of many times, and it reduces your audit burden. Again, we have a lot of that built in, but you can edit that too if you have some nuances that you want to address. You can also automate a lot of this evidence gathering through some integrations and automation tool that we have. That's not part of today's webinar, but just heads up, you can do that. So if you're seeing these little magic wands over here that say automations in some places, that's what that means. So that's controls and evidence management. It's a big upgrade from Excel and a share file. Hopefully add some continuity to your program. So let me talk about the next thing. So this is one of my favorite features in Phalanx that no one talks about. Everyone talks about risk register a ton. They talk about controls management. But one of the biggest problems a lot of our clients have is there's just a lot of tasks. There's a lot of stuff that is reoccurring, no matter what framework you're working in. If you're in ISO, SOC 2, PCI, whatever framework that might be, you always have to do things like annual policy refresh, quarterly IRC meeting, user access reviews, risk council meetings, vulnerability scans. If you're in PCI, you have to do firewall rule set reviews. You have to do just a number of reoccurring tasks. And the way that is usually solved is either the team is keeping an Excel spreadsheet with all of those reoccurring tasks, they're doing nothing, so they're just winging it and trying to remember to do it, or most often maybe they're someone on the team has added all of these events to their Outlook calendar, and they're just managing them as they come up. But if they leave the company and it's attached to their Outlook calendar or some personal list that they've maintained, all of those recurring processes are lost, and people don't have a lot of confidence that they're being maintained. So what do you do about this process? Hey, what are all the processes that are recurring that you need to remember to do? And by framework, what are they? When do you need to do them? Who owns them? And how do you know if your team is actually doing all of those reoccurring tasks? And what happens if they leave? So this is a problem that Phalanx solves. This is another feature in Phalanx called Compliance Calendar that is free. So if you go and apply for Phalanx Essentials, I'll show you how to do it here in a second. This is what I'm about to show you, you can have today. If you're a Risk 360 client, you can do the same. So let me show that off here. So I'm gonna find Compliance Calendar. All right, so this is Compliance Calendar. It's a module in Phalanx, and there's a couple really cool things and views that I wanna show. One view is just the calendar view. So if you just want to look at a month or a week or a day and just see all the events that are going on that day, you can view it just like an Outlook calendar. You can even sync this to your Outlook or Google Calendar. So if you want to create them all here, but you want to make sure you're not missing anything and sync it to your Outlook or Google, you can do that. But I just kind of like this view. It's a big picture view. I can see what myself or my whole team is doing. I can either I can filter this to see just my task, or as a manager, if I want to see everyone's task, I can do that. By clicking on any of these events, there's some really good reporting. So I can see what the status is, like is it overdue, is it complete, did they do that task? I can see what is dependent. So if there's evidence request, risks, or controls associated with the event, I can see that. I can add descriptions on or a procedure on what exactly should be done. I can see who owns it. If anyone's collaborating on the event, I'll know about it. I'll see the due dates. I can make the event recurring or one time. There's also a nice project management tool where if they need to upload a file, like they were supposed to do a user access review, they could upload that file to demonstrate that they did it, to keep it as evidence for later. If they need help, they could start tagging people. So maybe I want to tag John here. Can you help me, please? And just ask for help or get him to review it. So it's just a nice way to collaborate on those events internally. So I like this compliance calendar review is super helpful. What I love about this though is most of our clients, the question they ask is, well, what are all the events? What are all the things that I have to do? So we've created templates in the compliance calendar based on common frameworks. And I have 3 already pulled up here as an example. So ISO 27001 PCR SOC 2, we've gone ahead and created all the events that are typical to a program, and you can just publish them all. So if you want to make sure that you're not missing anything, or you want to sanity check your own recurring tasks, or just deploy these because you're building out a new program from scratch, you can just deploy from the templates and have everything on your calendar, and then go through and put them on dates and assign them and everything. You can also create your own template groups. So if you have a unique set of processes based on a product or something, and you want to bundle those into a deployable template group of tasks, you can do that. That's great if you have procedures that you want to deploy on here and make sure they're happening. Like if you have month-end close procedures for security or something like that, and you want to create that and make sure that they're deployed, you're welcome to do that. It adds a great sense of continuity and automation to the program. You can also view this as a list view. Some folks just like to see their whole list, like what are all the things I need to do. You can filter this by the day or the week, make that your weekly checklist, and make sure it's happening. I really like this because if I'm a compliance manager and I want to go in and kind of spot check my team to know if everyone's doing everything they need to do, check in on them, make sure they don't have any questions, I can use this list view and check out the status over here. I don't have any statuses filled out, which is why it's blank. But if I let me do one just to show you. So maybe it's overdue. So as I go through and I look at all the tasks, it's just a nice view for me to say, okay, look, I have an overdue task here. These are complete. These are complete. This one's overdue. I need to follow up with Kindle, see what's going on. It's great from a manager perspective. It's also very helpful from an individual perspective. Because I can, like I said, do my weekly task list, keep it in here, make it recurring. It's just how I'm making sure nothing's falling through the cracks. And if I need to delegate a task to someone else, or if Kindle here, who owns this one, leaves the company, he owns half of the task. Well, great. When I get my next hire, Jane Doe, I can reassign her all of those tasks, and I have a really good sense that I have continuity of the program. One of my favorite tools in Phalanx. Highly recommend it. Again, this is free in the essentials version. If you're not already using it, you can use it today. So let me walk through my my last piece here for today. My last get out of Excel technology piece, and that's vendor management. So I have done, and I could do a whole separate webinar for 2 hours on all the features and functionality that our vendor management module has to help you. And I'm going to give you a great summary today. But the problem our clients have most often are a couple things. One, vendor management or third-party risk is ad hoc. So they're not really doing much. Maybe they're as requested doing a security review on a vendor. Maybe they're only doing net new vendors. How they assess the vendor is not clear. So the what part of it, like what do I need to do vendor management? So we do have multiple vendor management policies based on best practices in Phalanx. So you could deploy those, and it tells you exactly what you should be doing in alignment with best practices. So if you're looking for the what part of it, there's policies, and also the way the platform works is in alignment with best practices. So it would take you through a best practices process. The other things that I see our clients struggle with is they're doing things in Excel, which is the theme here. They're probably sending out security questionnaires to their vendors and ask via email, and it's an Excel spreadsheet. They're saying, please fill out this Excel spreadsheet, get it back to me. It's really inefficient. The customer, your vendors hate it. It's not helpful to you, so it's not a great process. It's the same vendor questionnaire for pretty much every customer, so it's not right sized. The other thing is, how are you tracking that you actually did the vendor risk assessment and you did it against all the vendors that you need to do it against? That's often also in Excel or nothing at all. Maybe you have an Excel list of the vendors and you're just kind of going through that every year to try to make sure you hit them all. And it's out of date. It's based on a person keeping it up to date all the time. It's just not a great process, but that's how almost all of our clients start in building a vendor management program. So if your GRC team owns that, your security team owns part of that, you can use Phalanx vendor management module. So let me hop in here. I'm gonna go to our vendor management module. Maybe. Here we go. So here in our demo environment, let that load. All right, there we go. Here's vendor management. You'll see it is stylized very similar to risk register, and that's on purpose. We tried to make all of this stuff look and feel very similar so it would be intuitive to use. It is in alignment with all the best practices of a vendor management program in terms of inventorying vendors, risk ranking them, doing vendor risk assessments. So first thing you would want to do is inventory all those vendors. We have a lot of vendors pre-populated in Phalanx, but let's inventory all your critical vendors. I'll click in on one. What does that vendor do? Who are they? Who owns them? All that same information where you want to assign the contacts. Who's your main POC, point of contact at the vendor? Who owns the vendor internally? What does the vendor do? Categorize the vendor based on what they do. This will drive some dashboarding, etc. So a lot of just like metadata that you can gather about the vendor. You also want to do a vendor risk score. And what I mean by that is like, what does the vendor do? So if they gather a lot of PII, personally identifiable information, they're a key vendor to your company, well, you need to know that. So maybe if the vendor has an incident that's high impact, high likelihood, it's going to cost a ton, the vendors are expensive, they're a critical vendor to you. How critical are they? You want to document that stuff, and that's going to drive your methodology on how often you review that vendor, how important they are to your organization. If something did happen with that vendor, how you want to communicate with them. It drives a lot, so you need to do that, and you can do that here in Phalanx. You also want to do a review. So maybe you want to do an annual review, you want to deploy review. The two ways that you can do a review is maybe you just want to document a review. So you can deploy a review, you can start a review, and just document what you did. You looked at their SOC 2 report, you had a conversation with them. It's just a document. The other way you can do is maybe you do want to deploy a questionnaire to them because you need to find some information. You can also do that. You can deploy a questionnaire. It'll send them an email. They'll fill out the questionnaire. They'll return it to you, and you can collaborate with the vendor back and forth. I'm sure many of you have done that with your vendors, or you're on the receiving end of those similar questionnaires. So you can do either one, and you can track the progress and completion of that vendor review. I also like in Phalanx that you can track when your next review is due. So maybe you do it every year or every 6 months or something. You can add that here, and you can add it to your compliance calendar so that your team remembers that next review is due before the audit, or it's just part of regular housekeeping. And you can track how your reviews did. So let's say maybe you did a review and you had a risk. So I have Atlassian here. What were my risks? Did I identify anything? Okay, there were no risk on this one. So maybe, let me see if I can find one that has a risk. Here we go. So here's Cloudflex, not a real company. Okay, great. We identified a risk during review. Cloudflex is not compliant with GDPR. That was a risk for us. We got to follow up on that. So I can click in on that. It'll take me over to that that vendor risk, and I can find out what was going on. And I can track that down. I could add it to my risk register. What was the risk treatment decision, etc. So in this instance, I see that Cloudflex, I can track it down. What we do, we had a risk treatment decision. We decided to avoid that, and we will avoid doing business with this vendor considering that it will be hosting EU citizen data. So we avoided it. We decided not to go with the vendor. So it's just an ecosystem where you can inventory all of your vendors, assess them, assign vendor owners, assign due dates for reviews and questionnaires, deploy questionnaires, all within a platform, rather than trying to do that in an Excel spreadsheet or via email. So just another really important tool when it comes to a continuity and systematizing a GRC and security program. So those are some of the tools. So at the onset, we mentioned some of the problems that John had. Lack of program continuity, don't know doesn't have confidence in what to do or how to do it or who owns things. Those are some of the problems that John said he had that many of you have. And then we talked about how to solve that problem. We solve it through people defining roles and responsibilities. You have a template that you can download for that. We'll provide it. You can download it here in the webinar. We talked about establishing processes so everyone knows how to do the job they're supposed to do. Phalanx has all the documented policies and procedures. You can share those, you can edit them, you can get acknowledgements, all within Phalanx, lots of templates. And then we talked about 4 use cases that are tactically tools that you can use to get out of Excel and systematize a process. We talked about risk register, managing controls, managing recurring tasks, and then vendor management, and many, many more things that you can also do in Phalanx if you're managing a security and GRC program. Get out of Excel and systematize it. So the outcome, the ultimate outcome for John is now he knows, everyone knows what they need to do. They know the jobs that they need to do. They know how to do it because SOPs have been defined. They have tools to do it. And in my mind, arguably most importantly, they have program continuity. Processes aren't based on the knowledge of a specific individual. They are systematized, there's continuity, you can reassign those issues, and your program is lasting. That's the right thing to do for the company. And it's about establishing a system, not just the tool, but everyone knowing their jobs, knowing what the jobs are, everyone knowing how to do that, and then systematizing it through a tool. And I think Phalanx and Risk 360, we try to do that and try to support a program. I'll leave this up as we go. So if you want to sign up for Phalanx, you can do that here, and there's a QR code up. I'll leave this up as we're going through. That's the end of my presentation. I hope you guys have questions. If you have questions, I'd love to answer them. Enter them into the chat. There's always great questions, so please stick around for this. It's worth it. People always ask things that I forgot to cover. Corey, would you mind if any questions came up, just reading those out and we'll try to cover some of those?
Yeah, we'll go over the first one. Are the risk scoring levels customizable in the free version? They are looking to have more than 5 levels.
They are not in the free version. They are not. What they are based on is NIST 830 and ISO 27005. Shoot us a note though, because we haven't had that come up very often. So if you ask that question, I'd be curious what you're trying to accomplish. Is there a different framework you're trying to align to? Is it just something custom you're trying to do internally? Because some of that is things that we can edit. But just for my situational awareness, I'd love to know what you guys are trying to do.
Okay. The next one is it possible to map controls between multiple frameworks? I think they're looking for like ISO 27001 and PCI.
Yeah, there are. I didn't show you this view. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Lots of tabs open. So there's an all assessments view. So I have some deployed, but you can see here I have ISO, PCI, SOC 2. I can also add more. So if I were to create a project, this is my demo environment, so it's a little messy. I can choose from a bunch of templates for common frameworks. So I can deploy those. I can manage them separately or together. And then if I go into ISO 27001, there's a map icon that'll pop up. Hopefully I can show you that. Like there's a little map icon that tells you where we think it's mapped. And you can choose to accept that or not accept it. You can also manually add a mapping. So if you have custom controls, you want to map between them, so you can do a lot of that. And you can manage your program in a single harmonized framework. The other thing you can do is just build a custom framework that's like a single framework that incorporates all of them. We have some customers to do that. So whether you want to manage them separately or together, you can do both, and there's some features to do that. Whoever asked that, if you want me to demo that in more detail and kind of show you what you would do and how you might be able to set that up, shoot us a note and we'll be happy to go in that in more detail. But the bottom line is you can accomplish that objective.
So the next question is there an internal audit assessment for PCI?
Yes. Any of our assessments are set up. Let me go to it. Let me back out of here and go to the PCI one since you asked. So here's PCI, here's an assessment. So there's two, you can do a self-assessment. I didn't demo that in this this demo today, but we have something called self-assessments that's more questionnaire based. So we've translated the controls into like human readable questions, and you can answer yes or no. So if you're looking for like a more simple self-assessment tool, that would be that. You can just go through, yes, I do firewall reviews, no, I don't, and it'll give you a report based on that. If you need the detail though, like you need every sub requirement, assessments is what you want to do. And this is, you can see where we have built out all the PCI controls and evidence requests. And if I'm in a PCI control, I need to go to the controls view. PCI is a really large framework and I'm in a demo environment. Let me let this populate for a second. But it'll list out all of the controls. And what we've already done is we have a description of that control and also evidence that's typically associated with that control. and test procedures. So if you wanted to try to do your own self-assessment, you could do that and see the type of evidence that would be required. That's in our templates. You can also customize it for yourself. So whatever, bottom line is, whatever framework you choose, you can accomplish those types of things.
Okay. The next question is, like, how can they get the free version of Phalanx?
Yep. So if you're looking for free or paid versions, let me cover two things at once here. So maybe the best place to go to is our website. All right, so here's our website. Our website is phalanxgrc.com. You can also use the QR code I had up there. There's this button up here that says sign up for free. So if you click that button, it will ask you to basically register to sign up. And we do have an application review process that's taken. So I have lots of tabs open. So you can apply for a free account. There's things that, because this is free, there are companies that we don't accept. So just for everybody's heads up, if you're doing consulting work for another company, we don't let you come into the platform. And the reason we don't is because technically you're a third party assessing another company, and the company hasn't authorized that, so we can't allow that. We also don't let individuals who are looking for a job get into the platform, and the reason is because they have no company to assess, so it wouldn't be high value. So as a result, we manually review some of these. So if you fill this out, within 24 hours, you'll get an email and it'll give you access to the account and you can hop right in. So bottom line is, click this sign up for free button, fill out this application, and within 24 hours, you'll be in platform working. The other thing is, if most free isn't right for everybody. It's probably a great way to test out the platform, but you might need to pay for it because you need all the features. You have multiple frameworks. We have a few versions. So if you're like, for example, a startup that has one framework, not a lot of employees, but you need a platform to help you, you can start off for $250 a month. It gives you all the features you need to get through basically like a SOC 2 audit or a single framework. If you're a larger company, maybe you have multiple products, maybe you have multiple frameworks that you're trying to map against, scaling is probably a good option for you. And then if you're an enterprise, you have multiple business units, multiple products, lots of complexity, a lot of people using the tool, you need to integrate with a lot of systems, then that's probably when we need to talk. There's an enterprise version and we kind of need to scope it out to figure out what you're doing. So if you want to try it out, try Essentials, but if you think your program's complex enough and you're wondering how much it costs, you can go to our pricing page and that'll give you some directional numbers so you can figure that out.
Okay, the next question is, like, how do I get third-party responses to questionnaires back into the program?
So what happens in vendor management, I should have had this up, but what happens in vendor management is you will deploy questionnaires. So let's say you want to send it to me, Christian Hyatt at Risk360. You would stand up a questionnaire in Phalanx, press send, put the email address you want to go to, press send. It would come to me. I would be alerted that I need to fill out that questionnaire, and I would click the link. I would fill out the questionnaire that you asked me to fill out, and let's say that I partially filled that questionnaire out. Well, on your end, you would see that I opened it but didn't fill it out, or you would see that I completed it, or that I never even opened the email. So you could follow up with me if you needed to, but assuming I did my job and actually filled out the questionnaire and sent it back, you would get that questionnaire back. You could review the questionnaire. You could see if like there's security gaps or issues that you want to follow up on, or you could send me reminders you actually configure reminders. Well, it'll send me a follow-up email to know I need to fill out that questionnaire, but you can send them reminders to fill out the questionnaire. So there's some automation in there to help the recipient know that they need to prioritize to fill that questionnaire out. And there's some alerting and notifications on your side to know if they filled it out or not.
Okay, and we actually have two people with a similar question.
Okay.
Is CMMC 2.0 available in Phalanx?
Yes, it is called NIST 800, 171, and 172. That's the framework that CMMC is based out of. It is not available in the free one, though. We haven't made that available. If you want to do free, the two that we make available for free is ISO 27001 and SOC 2. So if you happen to be in the free one, you're looking for CMMC, that's not in there. There's also some nuances to CMMC that are probably worthy of discussion. So if you're asking that question, you're probably already aware of those nuances, like scope and can you self-assess versus is someone contractually requiring you to do that, and other things. So bottom line is, if you need CMMC, I would highly advise you reach out to us. So go to the website, contact us, or shoot me an email, and we can talk through it, and then talk through how you could use Phalanx for CMMC. It's not available in the free one. It is in the in our version though.
Actually, we have the same question for PCI. I think people are looking to see if PCI is available in the free version as well.
PCI is not available in the free. The only frameworks that we make available in the free version are SOC 2 and ISO 27001. If you want other frameworks or multiple frameworks, that's in our paid version, and a startup license is probably the way to go. Reach out to us and talk us through what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, the next question is, does your team support automations, and can we give a little information about the roadmap you guys are working on?
Yep. Yeah, so audit automation and continuous control monitoring is a big topic in the industry, and we do that stuff, and we're rapidly improving what we do. So to just talk roadmap a little bit. So we are implementing, not to use buzzwords, but we're legitimately implementing some really cool stuff that's coming out in Q1 from a roadmap perspective. We're going to continue with our automations and integrations engine and which apps that we integrate with. So we'll have a whole library of apps that we already integrate with. Also, we have capabilities for our customers to build out custom integrations, because sometimes you have a system you built yourself, or just a nuanced system, or a system that's non-standard that you just need to build your own integrations. We support that, as well as some out-of-the-box systems that we can integrate with to pull evidence and do controls monitoring. The other really cool thing that we're doing is some stuff with AI. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen ChatGPT and some of the AI stuff to build out platform intelligence and to give you guys some recommendations as you're doing write-ups and thinking through your program. So both of those things are coming out in short order. So look out for a webinar on that stuff soon. We do have some automations and integrations today that you can use.
Okay, the next question is, my company has multiple business units and products. Does Phalanx support that level of complexity?
Yes. So if you want to build out Phalanx to support a highly complex environment, you can. The most common setup is maybe you have multiple products, multiple business units supported by shared services. So what that would look like in assessments, for example, is you can do nesting. You could create parent-child relationships for all of these, where maybe you have a set of controls for corporate shared services. Then you have an ISO 27001 framework for one product, SOC 2 for another product. Then you have a nuanced change management process here, and you want to assign those all out to the different business units. You don't want them to be able to see everyone else's assessment, but you want to be able to manage it centrally. You want to be able to coordinate across multiple teams to gather that evidence and monitor controls. You can set that up. I don't have that set up like that in this demo environment, but what that would look like is something that said shared services, and then they're indented. There would be like the different control frameworks or products that you support. So that often comes up, for example, with PCI. PCI often has a slightly unique scope compared to something like ISO or SOC 2, because PCI is limited to only the card data environment. So the set of controls for PCI is more narrow in terms of scope than the other ones. So you might want to manage that a little distinctly. Or like I said earlier, you have shared services that are managed at the governance level, but all the product teams are managing something differently. So you can create nesting parent-child relationships. So if you have a complex organization, that's where we live. I love complex organizations. That's our bread and butter. So reach out to us if you want to accomplish that. So thanks for asking.
Okay, we have one more question. I know we're right at time.
Yep, let's do this one.
Are your solutions somewhere between startup and scaling? We have complexities, but for example, we never need a third-party management tool.
Just reach out to us. I mean, some of that's like custom. Maybe we can come up with a custom solution. Generally speaking, you're probably not going to want to do that. But if you have a custom need that didn't fit squarely in one of those buckets, just reach out to us and have a conversation. We can talk through that. I know we're right at time. Hey, thank you so much, everybody, for doing this. I hope you guys reach out to us. If you don't know me personally, connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know that you saw this webinar. We put out a lot of content, so that's a great place to get updates, and I'll connect with you and try to engage. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. I hope it was helpful. We'd love feedback. If there's other topics that you're hoping we cover, reach out to us, be part of our story, and we want to be part of yours. So thank you very much, and thanks, Corey.